The perpetual cool dampness of Arthur Finch's apartment was less an absence of warmth and more a constant, subtle presence, a quiet companion to his solitary existence. The faint smell of old books and settled dust hung in the air, a testament to years spent poring over forgotten histories. In the tiny kitchen, a single flickering bulb cast a hesitant glow, illuminating only what was strictly necessary. His evenings were spent in a worn, comfortable armchair, its fabric softened by countless hours, the springs groaning a familiar protest with every shift of his weight. It was here, in this quiet sanctuary, that Arthur often found himself. Tonight he held a tarnished, antique silver locket in his surprisingly nimble hands. His movements, though slow and deliberate, possessed a practiced grace, a testament to years of meticulous work. With a soft, lint-free cloth, he gently polished the intricate engravings on its surface, his gaze fixed on an old, faded photograph nestled inside. It was a picture of a young woman with a kind smile and eyes that sparkled with life, his late wife, Eleanor. Her memory, like the locket, was tarnished by time, but gleamed brightly under his devoted attention. Arthur lived on the fringes of society's notice, his quiet dignity often mistaken for insignificance. He wasn't destitute, but every penny counted. His clothes, though always meticulously clean, were visibly threadbare, a quiet testament to his dignified poverty. Arthur moved through his days with an almost invisible efficiency. He volunteered at the local library, meticulously reshelving ancient texts, his fingers tracing the spines of books that hadn't been touched in decades. He'd occasionally offer to mend a broken clasp on an old purse for a neighbor, or tighten a loose screw on a child's toy, never asking for payment, only a quiet nod of thanks. He was a man of quiet habits, a connoisseur of forgotten details. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Arthur hurried along a bustling city street, a young mother ahead of him let out a cry of exasperation. Her child's stroller, laden with groceries and a squirming toddler, had suddenly seized up, a wheel jamming against a loose paving stone. The mother, flustered and juggling multiple bags, struggled in vain, tears welling in her eyes as impatient pedestrians streamed past. Arthur, despite the slight tremor in his hands and the quiet ache in his knees, paused without hesitation. He wasn't just observing the broken stroller, he was assessing the mechanics of the jammed wheel, the angles of the pavement, the precise point of friction. With quiet efficiency, he knelt, his movements surprisingly fluid for his age. "Here, let me," he murmured, his voice gentle. He didn't offer advice, he simply acted. His gnarled fingers, surprisingly strong, worked with a delicate precision, nudging the wheel, applying just the right amount of pressure, and with a soft click, the stroller's wheel spun freely once more. "There you go," he said, offering a small, reassuring smile as the mother gasped in relief. She stammered her thanks, fumbling for her purse, but Arthur simply gave a faint wave of dismissal. "Just happy to help, dear." He offered a small, almost imperceptible smile, then continued on his way, his quiet act of selfless kindness going largely unnoticed by everyone but the now soothed mother and a distant observant street artist who watched with a curious gaze. This quiet, selfless act, performed with an almost invisible efficiency, ensuring he received no recognition, revealed Arthur's profound empathy, his intrinsic compassion, and an enduring quiet strength that resonated deep within him. This was Arthur's save the cat moment, instantly endearing him to the reader, showing that beneath his frail facade lay a deeply compassionate and capable heart. Late at night, long after the city's hum had dulled to a distant murmur, Arthur would often pull out a worn, leather-bound notebook from a locked drawer. Its pages were filled not with words, but with intricate, incredibly detailed sketches of clockwork mechanisms, tiny gears, elaborate escapements, and fantastical springs that seemed to defy the laws of physics. These weren't just drawings. They were the blueprints of his mind, a secret language he'd spoken since childhood. He had an uncanny ability to look at any antique object, a tarnished silver tea set, a dusty porcelain doll, even a chipped piece of pottery, and intuitively understand its history, its provenance, the hand that had crafted it. This was a knowledge far beyond that of a casual enthusiast, bordering on the preternatural. He might carefully extract a worn velvet pouch from a hidden compartment in the notebook, revealing a single, unusually cut, deep blue gemstone that seemed to pulse with an inner light, or a cryptic, fragmented map of an old, forgotten place. Its lines faded, but its secrets tantalizing. These intricate sketches, and his mysterious ability to discern the hidden stories of objects, were dismissed by casual acquaintances as eccentricities, the harmless hobbies of a lonely old man. They didn't see the complex algorithms that hummed beneath the surface of his doodles, the profound understanding of temporal mechanics, historical data, and material science that informed his every line. They didn't know that these abstract patterns were, in fact, echoes of a former brilliant career as a master horologist, a renowned art historian, and a descendant of a family with deep ties to hidden treasures, a legacy tragically cut short by circumstances beyond his control. He had once been a leading authority in a specialized field, before life's cruel turns had forced him to abandon it, to shed his identity and seek refuge in the anonymity of quiet survival. One evening, after helping a young intern at the local museum identify a mislabeled Roman coin, Arthur had momentarily left his sketchbook open on a quiet bench. The intern, a bright-eyed young woman named Clara Hayes, had glanced at it, a curious frown on her face. She'd seen the intricate lines, the odd flowing geometry of a clockwork mechanism that seemed to stretch into infinite dimensions. "Looks like some kind of impossible machine, Mr. Finch," she'd chuckled, handing it back. "You've got a hidden inventor inside you?" Arthur had merely offered a tired smile, quickly closing the book. Clara, however, hadn't forgotten it. She dismissed it at the time, but the image lingered, a small, curious detail in her mind. Arthur himself rarely thought about these things. He had buried his past, his ambitions, under layers of survival and the urgent, daily demands of quiet anonymity. He lived in the present, a world of scarce resources, careful budgeting, and the constant ache in his body. But these subtle habits, these fleeting moments of intense focus on complex patterns, were in reality the nascent tremors of a dormant volcano, the subconscious manifestations of a hidden past and an exceptional, almost unparalleled talent for horological and historical analysis. They were the seeds of a profound mystery, creating curiosity and laying the groundwork for the later, astonishing revelation of his true identity, his profound, specialized knowledge, and the astonishing truth about his connection to the very artifacts and historical narratives he would one day command. The quiet old man, invisible to most, held a secret that would soon shatter the carefully constructed reality of an arrogant security guard and an unscrupulous art collector, and redefine the very concept of cultural heritage. The pervasive scent of old books and settled dust in Arthur's apartment, usually a comforting, if unremarkable constant, now seemed to thicken, pressing down on him with an almost physical weight. It was a cold, dreary morning, the kind that promised no warmth and offered no hope. He clutched his worn overcoat, its fabric thin from years of wear, as he prepared for his usual volunteer shift at the Grand Museum of Art. He moved with the quiet diligence that was his hallmark, yet a subtle tension hummed beneath his calm demeanor. He had noticed a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in the delicate mechanism of his antique pocket watch, a treasured heirloom passed down through generations. This wasn't just a timepiece. It was a tangible link to his past, a personal item of deep sentimental value, carrying the weight of familial memories, and a legacy he guarded fiercely. As he arrived at the museum, its grand marble lobby already bustling with early visitors, Arthur carefully pulled out the tarnished, seemingly ordinary pocket watch from his coat. The tremor was still there, a faint flutter that perturbed him. He needed a quiet corner, perhaps a small toolkit, to make a minor adjustment. He spotted Officer Miller, a young, ambitious, and notoriously arrogant security guard, known for his dismissive attitude towards the elderly and his inflated sense of authority. Miller stood near the entrance, preening slightly for a group of passing tourists. Arthur, with a polite, almost apologetic demeanor, approached the guard. "Excuse me, officer," he began, his voice soft. "I wonder if you might know of a quiet place, or perhaps a small set of tools, where I could make a minor adjustment to my watch. It seems to be slightly off." He held out the watch, its elegant, if worn, casing glinting faintly in the museum's ambient light. Officer Miller's eyes, usually cold and calculating, gleamed with an almost predatory satisfaction. He glanced down at the watch, then at Arthur, his gaze sweeping over the old man's visibly worn clothes with unconcealed disdain. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Good morning, old man," Miller purred, his voice dripping with condescension. He didn't wait for a response. With a flourish, he extended a hand, not to help, but to snatch the watch from Arthur's grasp, his gaze sweeping over the cramped, humble interior of Arthur's life, with unconcealed disdain. "Honestly, old man, if you can't afford a decent timepiece, maybe don't bother with these delusions of grandeur. What is this? Some kind of broken junk you picked up at a yard sale? Don't go touching museum property with your quaint old toy." His eyes lingered on Arthur's trembling hands. "And certainly don't try to fix anything around here. We have professionals for that, not hobbyists." Arthur's breath hitched. His mind reeled. The shame was a bitter, metallic taste on his tongue. He felt the familiar, agonizing pull to retreat, to shrink into himself until he became invisible. His heart began to pound a frantic, suffocating rhythm against his ribs. He felt the echo of another public, equally devastating failure from his past, a catastrophic event that had led to the ruin of his former life, forcing him to shed his identity and seek refuge in the anonymity of survival. He wished the grand marble floor would simply open up and swallow him whole. But before Arthur could even fully process the crushing weight of his words, Officer Miller, reveling in his power, decided to amplify the public humiliation. He stepped back from Arthur, raising his voice so it carried clearly through the grand lobby, where several museum patrons were already peering out from behind display cases, drawn by the unusual commotion. "It's a matter of principle, you see, esteemed guests," Miller announced, his voice booming with theatrical righteousness. He cast a pointed glance towards Director Eleanor Vance, an astute, stern woman and the museum's director, who had just emerged from her office, drawn by the commotion. She was a Type B antagonist who, though not malicious, embodied institutional skepticism and formality. Miller, eager to impress, continued, "This institution demands a certain caliber of visitor. We cannot have unstable elements or those attempting to pilfer something by pretending to fix artifacts on museum grounds. Those who cannot maintain a respectable appearance, those who are perpetually struggling, simply do not belong in an establishment of our standards." He then turned his gaze back to Arthur, his voice dropping to a low, guttural snarl, barely audible to the stunned patrons but perfectly clear to Arthur. "You are a drain, old man. A drain on my patience, a drain on this museum's prestige. And frankly, your inability to manage a stable life for yourself, let alone handle a simple watch, makes you entirely unsuitable for this establishment. If this continues, I may even be compelled to report concerns to the authorities for suspicious behavior, given the instability you clearly present." His words, though whispered, struck Arthur like a physical blow. Unsuitable. Unstable. The sheer injustice and disproportionate cruelty of Miller's reaction, combined with the echoing memories of past unfairness, ignited a dormant sense of self-worth, a quiet, furious defiance. This wasn't just about a broken watch. It was about Officer Miller's abuse of power, his deliberate attempt to wound Arthur personally, to mock a legacy he had fought so hard to bury. A profound desire for justice, long suppressed, began to stir within him. He was no longer just ashamed. He was incandescent with a quiet rage. Among the hushed silence and the cruel pronouncements, an unexpected figure emerged from behind a towering exhibit. It was Mr. Reginald Thorne, a wealthy and influential art collector, antagonist Type A, a frequent donor, and a man with a reputation for ruthless art acquisition. He had observed Officer Miller's theatrics with a flicker of cold interest in his eyes. As Miller turned to accept Director Vance's perfunctory nod of acknowledgement, Thorne quietly approached Arthur. His movements were slow, deliberate. He merely observed Arthur's deep emotional connection to the seemingly ordinary watch, his gaze lingering on the worn piece. He said nothing, but the subtle, calculating glint in his eye suggested a man who saw opportunity in vulnerability. Amidst the hushed silence and the cruel pronouncements, an unexpected figure emerged from behind a towering exhibit. It was Mr. Reginald Thorne, a wealthy and influential art collector, antagonist Type A, a frequent donor, and a man with a reputation for ruthless art acquisition. He had observed Officer Miller's theatrics with a flicker of cold interest in his eyes. As Miller turned to accept Director Vance's perfunctory nod of acknowledgement, Thorne quietly approached Arthur. His movements were slow, deliberate. He merely observed Arthur's deep emotional connection to the seemingly ordinary watch, his gaze lingering on the worn piece. He said nothing, but the subtle, calculating glint in his eye suggested a man who saw opportunity in vulnerability. Another museum employee, a young, empathetic intern named Clara Hayes, helper, who had offered Arthur water previously, witnessed the scene with a mixture of anger and sympathy. As Miller delivered his final, crushing blow, Clara, unnoticed by the others, subtly dropped a small, carefully folded brochure into Arthur's trembling hand. It was an invitation to the local community center's Forgotten Treasures exhibition, highlighting their need for volunteers with a knack for historical identification. Her gaze met Arthur's, a quiet message of support passing between them. She offered a slight, reassuring nod, her eyes conveying a silent apology for the cruelty he was enduring. Miller, basking in the glow of his theatrical display of power, delivered his final, crushing blow. "You're a liability, old man, a stain on this institution, and you're utterly unsuitable for this caliber of establishment." The words echoed, final and crushing. The public, irreparable dismissal, amplified by Miller's personal, deeply cutting attack, and Mr. Thorne's lurking presence, shattered the last vestiges of Arthur's quiet anonymity. This incident created the ultimate point of no return for Arthur. He couldn't simply disappear again, retreat into another life of quiet servitude. The shame, the injustice, and the blatant disrespect for his hidden past were too profound. He was now forced onto a path where he must confront his past, reclaim his dignity, and expose the true value of his broken watch, bringing his hidden truth to light. The humiliation, the public dismissal, and the personal insult had shattered his world, but in doing so, they had ignited a fire within him, a dormant ambition that now burned with a fierce, unyielding need for vindication. The quiet old man, invisible to most, was about to unleash a storm. The harsh reality of public humiliation settled over Arthur Finch like a suffocating blanket. The memory of Officer Miller's sneering face, his cruel words echoing in the Grand Museum lobby, clung to Arthur like a shroud. His world, once precariously balanced on the quiet dignity of his anonymity, had crumbled, leaving him adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The tremor in his beloved pocket watch, once a minor annoyance, now felt like a metaphor for his own fragile existence. He sought temporary solace and a meager income at the local Community Arts and History Center, a struggling, aging building in the city's older district. Its worn brick facade hinted at a history of service, but its interior, permeated by the faint smell of dust and forgotten dreams, spoke of neglect and dwindling resources. Arthur, humbled and desperate, accepted any odd jobs he could find within the center's walls, repairing old furniture, assisting with minor electrical issues, or meticulously organizing their vast but uncatalogued collection of local historical documents. His hands, once accustomed to the quiet precision of his solitary doodles and the delicate mechanisms of fine watches, now scrubbed floors and sorted faded photographs. The ache in his muscles a constant reminder of his descent. The Community Arts and History Center itself was a microcosm of struggle. Its antiquated cataloging system, a remnant of a bygone era, was a perpetual source of frustration. It crashed daily, spitting out error messages and losing invaluable data. Resident records, historical document provenance, exhibit schedules, and, crucially, donor lists. The staff, dedicated but overwhelmed, despaired, their budget for repairs non-existent. The creaking hard drives and the flickering screens were a constant source of inefficiency, hindering their ability to preserve the very cultural heritage they were meant to safeguard. The center was preparing for its annual Forgotten Treasures exhibition, a key fundraising event where local residents brought in seemingly ordinary items for informal appraisal. The exhibition was in disarray, its ancient cataloging system constantly failing, and its budget for expert appraisals non-existent. One sweltering afternoon, a familiar wave of panic swept through the center. The main server for the exhibition's digital catalog, a monolithic beige box wheezing in a dusty closet, had succumbed. The screen monitoring its status had gone black, followed by a cacophony of frantic shouts and desperate pleas from staff members. "All the records are gone!" cried one, her voice laced with despair. "We can't access anything. The provenance documents, the artifact descriptions, the loan agreements. It's all lost." The crisis threatened to cripple the center, leaving hundreds of invaluable local artifacts without proper identification and jeopardizing years of painstaking historical preservation. The air crackled with palpable distress, a collective feeling of helplessness. Arthur, meticulously polishing an old wooden display case, felt the familiar surge of instinct. It was an involuntary response, a deep-seated need to impose order on chaos, to apply his innate understanding of fractured systems, both mechanical and historical. His hands, though tired from manual labor, twitched with a different kind of energy, an almost magnetic pull towards the ailing machine and the distressed historical documents. Without a word, he moved. He didn't ask for permission. He simply walked past the frantic staff members, his gaze fixed on the dead server and the piles of jumbled, uncatalogued papers. His movements were fluid, precise, confident, belying his humble volunteer uniform and his exhausted appearance. He knelt before the server, ignoring the dust and the frantic murmurs around him. His fingers, despite the calluses, moved with an uncanny delicacy, tracing the network cables, tapping at the diagnostic ports. He didn't just fix the system. He intuitively diagnosed a deeper systemic flaw in its antiquated archival architecture, a bottleneck in the data flow, a fundamental instability in its core programming, intertwined with a complete misinterpretation of historical methodology. It was a problem that decades of conventional IT solutions and historical cataloging practices had failed to address. He began to work, not with the hurried movements of a panicked amateur, but with the quiet intensity of a master. His brow furrowed in concentration, his eyes gleaming with an almost surgical focus. He pulled out a small, worn toolkit from his pocket, the same one he used to mend his pocket watch or his neighbor's faulty toaster, and began to connect a series of old, repurposed network cables in an unconventional configuration. It was a makeshift solution, yet brilliantly innovative, a testament to his profound, unconventional understanding of complex systems. Simultaneously, he began to sort through the physical documents, recognizing with a single glance intricate patterns of watermarks, paper composition, and script styles, swiftly categorizing them not just by date, but by a unique, almost forgotten historical logical flow, allowing him to reconstruct their provenance with startling accuracy. His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing lines of code that seemed alien, yet flowed with a seamless logic, while simultaneously cross-referencing information from the physical documents with blinding speed. He wasn't just restoring data, he was re-architecting the entire archival network from its core, optimizing its efficiency and security. He even implemented a subtle, almost forgotten coding technique for historical data preservation, a unique logical flow that hinted at a visionary background in complex horological and archival design, mirroring the intricate patterns of his doodles. Within minutes, the server's lights flickered back to life, then settled into a steady hum. The main screen, once dark, burst into a vibrant display of recovered and cross-referenced data. The system, once sluggish and prone to crashes, now hummed with unprecedented speed and stability, and the physical documents were organized into a coherent, easily accessible system. It wasn't just fixed, it was reborn, transformed into something far more robust, secure, and historically accurate. This was his unwilling revelation, a raw, pure expression of his talent, unburdened by ego or expectation. Clara Hayes, the empathetic museum intern who had offered Arthur water during his humiliation and later suggested the community center, had been observing Arthur from the doorway of the exhibition hall, her eyes sharp and perceptive. She recognized the peculiar intensity in his gaze, the almost unconscious precision of his movements, the unique, flowing logic of the cables he connected, and the startling speed with which he organized historical documents. She had seen something similar before, albeit fleetingly, the intricate doodles in his sketchbook, the ones she'd once dismissed as a mere hobby. As she watched him now, effortlessly re-architecting a complex digital archival system and simultaneously reconstructing historical provenance with uncanny accuracy. A spark of recognition ignited in her mind. She had spent years poring over obscure historical journals in her youth, fascinated by the theoretical concepts of fractal horology and resonant archival design, the very theories that had been championed by a legendary, almost mythical, horological and historical preservation methodology, a lineage believed lost to time. This was no ordinary IT knack or historical hobby. This was the unmistakable signature of a prodigious talent, a profound understanding of connectivity and optimization that she thought had been lost. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that Arthur Finch was connected to that forgotten legacy, a direct link to a past that Mr. Reginald Thorne would do anything to keep buried. Meanwhile, Mr. Reginald Thorne, despite his public disdain for common folk, had been privately consumed by a festering insecurity regarding his latest art acquisitions and his attempts to donate, for a hefty tax write-off, certain struggling cultural institutions, including the Community Arts and History Center, into his private collection. He had been planning to acquire its entire Forgotten Treasures exhibition for months, and the center's previous financial and systemic instability had been a convenient pretext for his machinations. He had sent his most trusted and least ethical associate, a slick, unassuming man named Mark, to discreetly assess the center's true value and pinpoint its vulnerabilities, particularly its unreliable provenance documentation. Mark's latest report, however, had thrown a wrench into Thorne's carefully laid plans. It detailed the sudden, inexplicable efficiency of the center's digital archival systems and a mysterious old man, a former museum volunteer he'd heard, who seemed to be behind it, making an unusually high number of seemingly worthless artifacts suddenly appear quite valuable due to their newly confirmed provenance. Thorne dismissed it as a fluke, a temporary fix, but the seed of doubt and a rekindling of his old, deep-seated greed was sown. Thorne had a meticulous network of informants and a profound paranoia. He certainly wasn't going to let this unsuitable old man disappear into obscurity, not if he posed a threat to his carefully constructed acquisition. He remembered the vague whispers of an old, obscure, time-sensitive clause in the community center's original charter. If its entire exhibition, specifically its provenance documentation and the authentication of its centerpiece, an unlisted lost chronometer, believed to be inextricably linked to the Vance horological dynasty, failed a critical independent audit within a specific time frame, ownership would revert to a powerful hidden consortium, a consortium Thorne secretly controlled through a labyrinthine network of shell companies. He had been preparing to trigger this clause, to seize the collection at a fraction of its true value, then sell the truly priceless items on the black market. Upon learning of Arthur's uncanny abilities, Mr. Reginald Thorne, a Type A villain, antagonist driven by insatiable greed and a ruthless desire for profit, took swift, malicious action. He began to subtly spread venomous rumors within the local Cultural Heritage Society and City Council, leveraging his extensive network of contacts and his formidable financial influence. He fabricated stories about the community center's mismanagement, its outdated infrastructure, and its alleged security vulnerabilities, attempting to accelerate the ownership reversion clause and create an undeniable legal basis for his takeover. These rumors, whispered in hushed tones to influential council members and cultural review boards, were designed to create a political and intellectual vacuum around the center, ensuring no legitimate external support would intervene. But Thorne's malice didn't stop there. He also orchestrated a direct, more insidious challenge to the center's newfound stability, and by extension, to Arthur himself. He anonymously sent a highly aggressive cultural heritage audit team to the center. This audit was, in reality, a covert attempt to introduce fraudulent documentation or manipulate its digital provenance records from afar, designed to trigger a catastrophic failure within the crucial 72-hour window stipulated by the ownership clause, particularly focusing on the lost chronometer's supposed lack of authenticity. He ensured his hired auditors left no direct digital or physical trace back to him, but the unique, sophisticated nature of the manipulated data bore his unmistakable signature of insidious intent, a cold, calculated move to undermine Arthur's work and secure his illicit acquisition. His actions were not merely about acquiring artifacts. They were calculated, cold-blooded attempts to exploit a loophole and ensure Arthur's quiet brilliance remained unacknowledged, allowing him to seize control of the valuable collection. He had no qualms about disrupting the lives of hundreds of vulnerable families or destroying priceless historical data if it meant furthering his own profit. His villainous status was now solidified, revealing a deeper, more profound malice against cultural heritage than mere acquisition. He intended to ensure that Arthur, the unsuitable old man, remained an insignificant stain on his path to financial immortality. The grand formal main hall of the Grand Museum of Art, usually a bastion of hushed reverence for timeless artifacts, now thrummed with a palpable tension. Its polished marble floors reflected the harsh glare of overhead lights, illuminating rows of plush, empty seats that would soon be filled with eager citizens, local journalists, and, most importantly, the members of the Cultural Heritage Tribunal. This was no ordinary meeting. It was a highly publicized hearing, a crucible where the fate of the Community Arts and History Center's Forgotten Treasures exhibition and the hidden truth of Arthur Finch's life would be decided. For Arthur Finch, it was more than just a hearing. It was the symbolic arena where he would either reclaim his shattered dignity and the legacy of his family, or be permanently relegated to the shadows, watching as Mr. Reginald Thorne's greed consumed another vital piece of his community's history. Mr. Thorne himself was already present, a grim, self-satisfied sentinel at the head of a long table, his presence a constant, sneering reminder of Arthur's past humiliation. Arthur stood off to the side near a podium reserved for public speakers, a solitary figure amidst the growing bustle. His simple, well-worn clothes, though meticulously clean, contrasted sharply with the custom-tailored suits of Mr. Thorne and his formidable legal entourage. Their presence radiated an aura of unassailable authority, their expensive briefcases resting heavily on the table before them. Arthur had only himself, a small worn satchel containing his prototype microprojector, and the quiet, fierce determination that burned in his gut. While Clara Hayes, his newfound helper and an astute ally, was present, a comforting, if distant presence in the audience, armed with carefully prepared, irrefutable evidence of Mr. Thorne's archival sabotage attempts, the intellectual, emotional, and technical battle of revealing his revolutionary resonant horology and challenging Thorne's lies rested solely on Arthur. He had to rely on the raw power of his forgotten horological and historical genius, its undeniable logic, and his unwavering conviction in his vision, despite the overwhelming skepticism from the tribunal members, including Director Eleanor Vance of the museum, initially formal and skeptical, and Thorne's constant critical gaze. The hearing commenced with a predictable rhythm of procedural announcements. Then Mr. Reginald Thorne, leveraging his immense financial influence and formidable reputation as a visionary philanthropist and discerning collector, stepped to the main podium. He began his introductory remarks with a polished, self-aggrandizing speech, his voice resonating with cultivated authority. He spoke of preserving heritage versus archaic sentimentality, the necessity of expert private custodianship, and the timeless elegance of modern profitable art acquisition. His words, though seemingly generic, were sharp, subtle barbs aimed directly at the community center's disorganized collection and, by extension, at Arthur. He subtly hinted at outdated infrastructure and unreliable provenance documentation, effectively undermining any value the center held and attempting to influence the tribunal members towards his own rigid, profit-driven aesthetic. "Tonight," Mr. Thorne declared, his gaze sweeping over the formal setting, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on Arthur's unassuming figure, "we will discern the true path forward for our city's cultural assets. We will see who possesses the disciplined foresight, the refined economic palate, and the inherent understanding of true historical value that elevates mere sentimentality to genuine opportunity. This is not a playground for nostalgia, but a crucible for proven preservation." The audience, largely composed of local business owners, affluent art patrons from Thorne's other ventures, and a scattering of skeptical community activists, nodded in polite agreement. This was his moment, his triumph. He concluded by confidently predicting a future generation of cultural institutions that honor the legacy of true innovators, subtly solidifying the perception that only conventional, classical, profit-driven acquisition held true value. The air thrummed with expectation, the low murmur of conversations punctuated by the occasional clinking of water glasses from the tribunal table. A powerful, influential tribunal member, the Chief Justice of Cultural Heritage, Dame Alistair Vance, a sharp, discerning public servant known for her integrity, and, unbeknownst to Thorne, a distant relative of Arthur's, with a severe, inscrutable expression, known for her meticulous attention to historical detail, approached the main tribunal table. She was about to announce the final vote on the acquisition, a moment that would further cement Thorne's perceived authority and legally seal the community center's fate. Arthur felt the time pressure acutely. He had a narrow, self-imposed window, mere minutes, to present his alternative, revolutionary historical horological solution for the exhibition, a solution designed not just to save it, but to redefine provenance verification and artifact authentication, and, in doing so, to reveal the true hidden value of his broken watch as a priceless artifact from a stolen collection. The tension in the hall was amplified by the presence of a live international news audience, their camera lenses gleaming, capturing every moment for the evening broadcast. Their expectations for drama were palpable. Mr. Thorne, never one to miss an opportunity for psychological warfare, continued his subtle campaign of intimidation. "Remember, tribunal members," he drawled into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescension. "A true master can elevate even the humblest of properties. But a true master also knows the limits of their abilities. One cannot simply will sound historical preservation into existence. It must be inherited, cultivated, refined through generations of shrewd investment. Some, unfortunately, are simply not born with it." He then spent an additional 15 minutes lecturing on modern eccentricities and undisciplined self-expression in cultural heritage, subtly mocking any form of historical or community-focused preservation that veered from his prescribed path. He believed he was educating, guiding, but in reality, he was imposing his prejudices, reinforcing a system that stifled genuine historical inquiry rather than fostering it. He was confident that, by the end of this hearing, Arthur would either conform or simply give up, proving his point about Arthur's lack of serious historical ambition. As Arthur prepared his prototype microprojector, discreetly connecting it to a hidden port he'd identified earlier, Mr. Thorne intensified his subtle efforts to sabotage him. He whispered distracting remarks to a nearby journalist, making false claims about Arthur's supposed unprofessionalism and unproven track record. He even subtly signaled his hired IT associate, a smarmy man named Kenneth, who sat inconspicuously in the front row, giving him a barely perceptible nod. Kenneth, using a tablet concealed under his jacket, began to quietly tap away, attempting to hack into the museum's public display system, aiming to corrupt Arthur's live projection if he dared to present it. Thorne wanted to ensure Arthur's presentation, if he even managed one, would be a public disaster. The dramatic irony in the room was almost suffocating. The hundreds of seemingly sophisticated minds in the audience, the esteemed tribunal members, the eager philanthropists, the influential journalists, and Mr. Thorne himself, were utterly oblivious to the true, multi-layered war that was about to unfold. They were listening to the swan song of an old paradigm of cultural heritage acquisition, completely unaware that a quiet, overlooked elderly man, armed with his crazy invention, a profound horological and historical genius rooted in a forgotten family legacy, held the key to transforming the very definition of artifact authentication and exposing the profound intellectual arrogance of their celebrated collector. They saw only the surface, blinded by their own prejudices and preconceptions of what historical art should be. Thorne, basking in the glow of the spotlights, prepared to deliver his final, triumphant pronouncement, oblivious that the meaningless scrawlings of Arthur's true genius, the very essence of the unsuitable life he had dismissed, were about to become the hammer that shattered his carefully constructed world and redefined the boundaries of cultural preservation forever. Arthur took a deep breath, clutching his prototype, his gaze fixed on the imposing figure at the podium. His moment, the moment of truth, was upon him. The faint hum of his device, barely audible beneath the escalating tension, was a quiet prelude to the historical revolution he was about to unleash. The rhythmic clinking of crystal glasses and the polite murmur of conversation, once the deceptive calm before the storm, had transformed into an electrifying silence that crackled with anticipation. Mr. Reginald Thorne, a man radiating smug satisfaction, stood at the gleaming podium, bathed in the cool glow of professional spotlights. He had just concluded his polished, self-aggrandizing remarks, praising the discipline and adherence to timeless forms of cultural preservation. On the immense digital display behind him, a slideshow of his completed art acquisitions shimmered, a visual testament to his unyielding historical dogma and financial prowess. He turned to acknowledge the polite applause, his hand already reaching for a crystal glass of water, a perfectly orchestrated moment of triumph. This was the crescendo of his art acquisition reign, and for a fleeting second, the sheer weight of his established dominance threatened to crush Arthur. The air crackled with the triumph of established dogma and unquestioned authority, seeming to drown out Arthur's vital truth. This was the bated breath moment for Arthur. Everything seemed to conspire against him, his profound vision seemingly lost amidst the polished rhetoric and the pervasive acceptance of Thorne's pronouncements. Just as Mr. Thorne turned, a self-satisfied smile playing on his lips, Arthur acted. A subtle digital alert, an almost imperceptible shimmer on the compact tablet hidden within the folds of his worn coat, confirmed the critical moment. His real-time spectral analysis sensors, discreetly integrated into the podium's internal systems hours earlier by a sympathetic technical assistant, influenced by Clara, indicated the perfect ambient conditions for a live, visual demonstration of his horological art's unique properties. His voice, initially a mere tremor of resolve, gained an unexpected clarity, cutting through the polite murmurs like a finely sharpened blade. "Mr. Thorne," he called out, stepping forward from the periphery of the public speaking station, his simple, unadorned attire a stark contrast to the glittering suits that filled the hall. "With all due respect, your timeless forms have a fundamental oversight." A collective gasp swept through the auditorium, a ripple of astonished whispers. Arthur's sudden, audacious interruption of such a prestigious event was itself a profound shock. Mr. Thorne, startled, spun around, his polished smile instantly replaced by a scowl of pure disbelief and seething irritation. He recognized Arthur. "Mr. Finch," he sneered, his voice now laced with undisguised contempt, amplified by the podium microphone. "I believe we settled your childish fantasies months ago. This is hardly the time or place for your bizarre disruptions. Return to your seat." Several guests turned, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and annoyance, urging Arthur to comply with their disapproving glares. One even hissed, "Don't you dare ruin this, sir. This is serious business." But Arthur stood his ground, his eyes fixed on Mr. Thorne, a quiet fire burning within them, fueled by years of dismissal and the urgent necessity of his mission. "The meaningless lines you've been overlooking, Mr. Thorne," Arthur stated, his voice clear and resonant, projecting throughout the cavernous hall. "They weren't just theoretical. They are a fundamental flaw in your entire paradigm, and they're about to be exposed. Your model of true historical art is obsolete." He stepped further forward, towards the main stage, his movements deliberate and unwavering, his every step radiating quiet conviction. He held his prototype microprojector aloft, not as a weapon, but as a beacon of defiance. Thorne, incandescent with rage and a dawning, unwelcome tremor of professional fear, moved to block Arthur. "Security!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the hall, tinged with a desperation that was uncharacteristic. "Remove this insane trespasser. He's a disruptor, a fraud." Just as a burly event security guard began to move from the back of the room, Arthur reached the edge of the stage. With a swift, almost practiced motion, he pulled out his hidden, compact prototype microprojector from a specially designed pocket in his coat. Simultaneously, he tapped a discreet earpiece, his voice calm but firm as he spoke into a hidden mic connected to Clara Hayes, who was already positioned at a prearranged technical console backstage, having anticipated Arthur's audacious move. "Clara, prepare for emergency protocol. I'm taking manual override of the main display, initiating live data feed." He connected a small, inconspicuous data cable from his prototype projector to a nearby, seemingly innocuous podium port, bypassing the summit's main digital display system. The elegant graphics of Thorne's luxury acquisitions vanished, replaced by a stark black screen that suddenly flashed with complex, pulsing horological data streams. "Your conventional historical preservation," Arthur stated, his voice resonating with quiet, unshakable command, "presumes a linear progression of form and a finite definition of historical value. But what if the source of true historical art is fractal? What if the solution to archival stagnation is being overlooked from multiple unseen dimensions of flow, interconnectedness, and provenance potential?" With dazzling speed and precision, he activated his prototype, and its quiet hum filled a part of the hall, barely audible at first. Simultaneously, he began to manipulate the interface on his device. Elegant, fluid lines of real-time historical data, ambient atmospheric conditions, subtle material degradation rates, even the unique wear patterns on forgotten artifacts, flowed onto the immense screen behind him, overlaid with the stunning visual cryptography of his unique horological system. Swirling fractals, interconnected nodes, and self-evolving geometric patterns, each corresponding to a specific algorithmic function within his design, now actively processed the sensory conditions of the hall. These doodles, as Thorne had scornfully called his subtle design marks and systemic optimizations, were now demonstrably active, a living, breathing testament to his revolutionary approach. Each stroke on his device's interface was deliberate, each line of data a precise hammer blow against the conventional, less dynamic models of historical preservation and perception. He filled the screen not with complexity for complexity's sake, but with an astonishing, almost frightening clarity that laid bare the fundamental oversight at the heart of Mr. Thorne's vulnerable, conventionally secured historical dominance. His data projected unprecedented artifact resonance, capable of generating profound aesthetic and functional experiences at a fraction of the effort, and at a scale that could genuinely redefine historical boundaries. Then came the bated breath moment. Mr. Thorne, initially scoffing, his arms crossed, his face a mask of patronizing disbelief, suddenly froze. His eyes, fixed on the rapidly scrolling data and the intricate pulsing patterns that seemed to shift and evolve on the screen, widened imperceptibly. He saw the sheer volume of environmental variables being processed, the speed of the device's calculations, the undeniable precision of the visual output projections, a direct challenge to his core historical preservation tenets. He opened his mouth to retort, to dismiss it as a trick, but no sound came out. The security guard, halfway to the stage, paused, his brow furrowed, caught by the sheer audacity and inexplicable technical sophistication of Arthur's impromptu live demonstration. On stage, Mr. Thorne was mid-sentence, his hand raised to announce the final phase of his luxury art acquisition initiative, when the immense digital display, now controlled by Arthur's prototype, flashed. It didn't just flicker to a new set of data. A series of angry red lines of code, clearly from the museum's internal network, began to scroll frantically across the screen, overlaid with a stark, taunting message. "System compromised. Heritage provenance depreciating. Your control is an illusion." This was not Arthur's doing, but the simultaneous cyber attack launched by a group of disillusioned cultural activists and radical provenance researchers, operating under the clandestine moniker, the Kronos Collective. They were hitting the museum's online acquisition archives and property records precisely as Thorne was speaking, exposed and amplified by Arthur's accidental system override. The museum's public acquisition website, which had previously displayed the prestigious list of Mr. Thorne's successful projects, began to glitch and then plummeted into an alarming display of distorted abstract images and flashing red alerts. A collective gasp swept through the gala, followed by an electrifying, horrified silence. Dame Alistair Vance, the sharp Chief Justice of Cultural Heritage, her eyes wide with a mix of horror and exhilaration, began furiously typing on her phone, her scandalous story about Thorne's art acquisition dominance shifting dramatically. Simultaneously, in a hidden back room, the museum's official IT team was in a frenzy, shouting about rapidly disappearing digital assets, unprecedented historical data breaches, and seemingly impenetrable firewalls. "It's a full-spectrum digital historical attack," yelled one frantic technician, his voice cracking. "They're corrupting our archives. Our provenance files are worthless. Clara Hayes, sweating and frantic at her prearranged console, stared at a screen displaying a cascade of encrypted data, recognizing the unique visual patterns of Arthur's art embedded within the streaming environmental data. These patterns were now changing with blinding speed, not just demonstrating his device, but inadvertently creating a digital shield, an unexpected anomaly against the Kronos Collective's malicious code, by virtue of the sheer complexity and non-linear logic of his system. She pointed frantically to Arthur, who had just connected his prototype, his face grimly determined, now fully aware of the digital crossfire he had stumbled into. "It's his code! His system is somehow disrupting their attack. You're the only one who can control this, Arthur." Just as Mr. Thorne's art acquisition empire seemed irretrievably lost, as the museum's digital historical legacy plunged further into oblivion, Arthur, with a final, almost imperceptible adjustment to a sequence of geometric patterns on his device's interface, executed a masterstroke. He wasn't just demonstrating his invention, he was leveraging its underlying, unique algorithm, designed for complex pattern recognition and resource optimization, to inadvertently neutralize the malicious cyber attack. The patterns on the main screen locked into place, transforming into a glowing, impenetrable fortress of visual code. On the main summit screen, the Kronos Collective's angry red message froze, then began to dissolve, replaced not just by Arthur's own elegant green patterns of sustainable historical flow, but by real-time data showing the museum's digital assets plummeting, then inexplicably stabilizing, then slowly, agonizingly, beginning to recover, as Arthur's system inadvertently isolated and neutralized the deepest, most damaging elements of the Kronos Collective's digital assault, while simultaneously exposing Thorne's vulnerabilities for all to see. The hackers' attack not only halted, but their own malicious code seemed to recoil, their digital tools rendered ineffective by the sheer, unexpected elegance of Arthur's non-linear system. This unexpected, devastatingly powerful reversal simultaneously silenced the hackers, salvaged the museum from complete digital ruin, and stunned everyone by proving Arthur's genius was not only in horological art, but in a profound, almost accidental understanding of complex systemic vulnerabilities and historical provenance. Mr. Thorne's face contorted. The arrogance drained from him, leaving behind a pallor of utter intellectual devastation and a profound public humiliation. His eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, glazed over as he stared at the screen, then at Arthur, his empire saved, yet fundamentally exposed and transformed, before his very eyes. Dame Alastair Vance's skeptical sneer dissolved into a look of astonished professional wonder, her prepared speech about conventional historical preservation completely irrelevant. Officer Miller, initially dismissive, watched in stunned silence, a look of dawning shame and profound regret slowly replacing his usual haughty demeanor. Director Eleanor Vance's skeptical sneers dissolved into looks of astonished professional wonder. The audience, initially confused by the flicker, erupted in a spontaneous, thunderous applause as the digital assets were confirmed, then slowly began to recover, unaware of the full digital war that had just taken place, but recognizing the restored, though now vulnerable, grandeur of the museum, and the quiet, unassuming figure who had made it possible. For Arthur, the victory was quiet but profound. The vindication of his true genius, the revolutionary nature of his art as a technological solution, and the ultimate triumph of underestimated talent over elitism, academic dogma, and superficiality. The thunderous applause for Arthur, still ringing in the Grand Museum of Art auditorium, was a death knell for Mr. Reginald Thorne's unassailable facade. He stood on stage, a visibly shaken man, his face a mask of utter humiliation amidst the wreckage of his professional pretense and the near-digital ruin of the museum's urban planning archives. The international media, initially focused on his grand pronouncements, swiveled their cameras. They captured the quiet, once-dismissed elderly man who had not only unveiled a world-changing horological theory, but had also, inadvertently, salvaged the city's plummeting digital legacy from a full-scale cyber attack, all while exposing Mr. Thorne's deep-seated prejudices and corporate fraud. The online live stream of the hearing, which had been recording the entire dramatic sequence, was quickly going viral, capturing every second of Mr. Thorne's unraveling and Arthur's quiet, yet profound, triumph. Mr. Thorne's downfall. Mr. Thorne's downfall was swift, absolute, and brutally public. Within hours, clips of his dismissive comments about Arthur's childish fantasies and meaningless scribbles were juxtaposed with live footage of Arthur effortlessly stabilizing the museum's collapsing digital archives and demonstrating the revolutionary, resonant properties of his horological art. His pristine reputation as an infallible collector and a discerning cultural titan was not merely tarnished. It was shattered into a million pieces. His numerous interviews with prominent art journals, where he had espoused on proven artistic models and established masters, while subtly mocking naive, unproven idealists, now served as damning testaments to his profound arrogance and intellectual blindness, fueling a firestorm of ridicule across traditional and social media platforms. Patrons, unnerved by the public display of digital vulnerability, the near-catastrophic attack on the museum's records, and Mr. Thorne's sheer arrogance that had almost cost the cultural heritage sector its digital legacy, began discreetly canceling reservations for his upcoming private gallery openings and proposed donations. His collections, though digitally stabilized by Arthur's accidental intervention, remained volatile, their future uncertain under Mr. Thorne's discredited leadership. Cultural heritage societies and art acquisition boards, alerted by the hearing's chaos and the public outcry, launched immediate investigations into his rigid acquisition practices, his fraudulent claims of ethical conduct, and his attempts to suppress competing, unconventional historical expressions. Citizen protests, fueled by a newfound appreciation for artistic freedom and authentic community development, crippled his remaining authority, as public sentiment overwhelmingly shifted toward supporting Arthur's innovative, inclusive vision of historical preservation over Mr. Thorne's dogmatic, exclusionary approach. Mr. Thorne was forced to issue a humiliating public statement, a bitter acknowledgement of Arthur's pivotal, albeit unexpected role, in averting a complete digital collapse, and implicitly acknowledging the transformative potential of his unique horological vision. This was a bitter pill for his ingrained elitism and towering ego. While the museum's digital infrastructure was not completely ruined, thanks to Arthur's unwitting intervention, Mr. Thorne's personal and professional standing plummeted. He became a pariah within the very academic and art collecting circles he had so desperately sought to impress and dominate. He lost all that he had valued: his high-profile acquisitions, his sponsorships, his carefully constructed legacy, to the undeniable truth Arthur had unveiled, not just about his design, but about the true cost of unchecked corporate arrogance, intellectual rigidity, and familial betrayal. His pride, the very engine of his ambition, had consumed him, leaving only public shame and professional ruin in its wake. He was ultimately forced to resign from his position at his acquisition firm and effectively blacklisted from the upper echelons of the art world, his name now synonymous with a colossal failure of vision and ethics in cultural preservation. The revelation of the lost sapphire chronometer, as part of a stolen collection he intended to acquire under false pretenses, led to a full-scale police investigation, likely culminating in criminal charges for art fraud and grand theft, ensuring his total and utter destruction. Arthur's new dawn. For Arthur, the world shifted from dim lamplight to blinding brilliance. The sheer audacity, elegance, and undeniable efficacy of his resonant horology, his unique symbolic design language, and its unexpected digital capabilities immediately captivated the global scientific community and cultural heritage organizations. Dame Alistair Vance, the shrewd Chief Justice of Cultural Heritage, who had recognized the ancient origins of Arthur's techniques and the subtle nuances of his doodles and the patterns of his designs, wasted no time. She immediately approached Arthur, bypassing conventional academic and corporate hierarchies, with an offer that was both unprecedented and irresistible. She secured Arthur a full professorship at the prestigious Lumen Institute of Experimental History, an exclusive, progressive cultural heritage academy known for fostering visionary and avant-garde historians and conservators, providing unprecedented creative control over a newly established division dedicated to interdisciplinary resonant provenance. This wasn't merely an academic opportunity, it was an invitation to transform his art into a legitimate, groundbreaking field of study, blending ancient knowledge with modern technology. He was no longer burdened by financial worries, or the suffocating constraints of academic marginalization. His cramped alleyway existence, his makeshift lab in his mind, and the constant struggle for basic necessities were exchanged for a spacious, state-of-the-art conservation studio within the Lumen Institute's secure headquarters. Its walls, once bare, were soon adorned not with textbooks, but with groundbreaking new diagrams of his evolving resonant patterns and the intricate schematics of interactive historical installations. He was given complete intellectual freedom, an unlimited budget for research and development, and the autonomy to build a team of brilliant, like-minded, and open-minded historians, horologists, and technologists, eager to explore the new frontiers of human perception and artistic expression he had unveiled through design. His former struggles transformed into a position of profound influence, intellectual leadership, and historical impact, his quiet brilliance finally given the platform it deserved. Meanwhile, Officer Miller, the Type B antagonist, experienced a profound public moment of realization and repentance. Witnessing Arthur's undeniable genius and the full extent of Mr. Thorne's malice, Officer Miller was overcome with shame. He publicly apologized to Arthur, his voice cracking with genuine remorse, acknowledging his own prejudice and the unfairness he had previously contributed to. His repentance was tangible. He offered to volunteer his time and even some of his personal savings to support Arthur's initiatives at the museum, becoming a vocal advocate for ethical artifact handling and the recognition of hidden talent. He even requested a transfer to the museum's security detail, where he committed to protecting its historical integrity with renewed purpose. Director Eleanor Vance, initially embodying institutional skepticism, also underwent a significant change. Deeply impressed by Arthur's brilliance and integrity, she apologized for her initial dismissiveness and, aligning with Dame Alastair Vance's initiative, offered Arthur a prestigious position as the museum's chief horological historian and conservator, giving him full autonomy over the museum's antique collections and future acquisitions. She even helped secure initial funding for the new Vance Chronological Preservation Project, an initiative she now fully endorsed. A shared reflection. A few weeks after the hearing, Arthur sat with Clara Hayes, now his primary research assistant and invaluable collaborator, and Dame Alastair Vance, his distant relative and an astute ally, in the quiet solitude of his new studio at the Lumen Institute. The late afternoon sun streamed through a large skylight, dappling through the leaves of a towering fig tree in a planter, casting shifting patterns on the polished concrete floor. The air, unusually fresh for the city, carried the faint scent of new blueprints and fresh coffee, a comforting balm after the sterile environment of the hearing. "You know, Arthur," Clara began, her voice soft, a warm, almost reverent smile on her face, "when I first saw your patterns in that old sketchbook, and then watched you on that stage, it's not just a paradigm shift, it's a revolution. You've redefined what's possible in historical preservation and in how we perceive the past. To think, Mr. Thorne dismissed it as clumsy from an unsuitable old man. The irony is almost poetic." She gestured vaguely towards the window, where the city skyline shimmered. He thought he was protecting history, but he was just limiting it. Arthur traced a pattern on the condensation of his water glass, a habit that remained from his days of quiet contemplation, a tactile connection to the unseen world. It was always there, Clara. The numbers, the patterns in nature, the way reality organizes itself, the inherent language of the universe. People just couldn't see it because it didn't fit their predefined frameworks. Mr. Thorne couldn't see it because his ego and greed blinded him to any value outside his narrow, academically defined world. He saw history as something to be controlled, to be acquired, not something to be felt, to be discovered. He chose to betray our family's true legacy for his own fabricated one. "And your courage," Dame Alastair added, her voice soft but firm, "to stand up there, alone, against decades of entrenched corporate thought, and a man who could professionally crush you. That's as profound as your genius. Many brilliant minds get silenced because they lack that courage." "It makes me wonder," Dame Alastair mused, her gaze sweeping over the cityscape. "How many other insignificant variables, how many other primitive scrawlings are waiting to be understood? How many other truths are being missed because we're too set in our ways, too quick to dismiss what doesn't fit our preconceived notions, or because it comes from a place we deem unworthy. Their reflective dialogue, though brief, encapsulated the intricate journey they had shared, the unexpected twists of intellectual discovery, and the profound lessons learned about the nature of truth, the dangers of academic and social dogma, and the bravery it takes to challenge established norms for the greater good. Arthur looked out at the vibrant city, a subtle shift in his posture reflecting his journey from a quiet, overlooked cleaner to a recognized intellectual leader and horological visionary. The world no longer seemed a place of silent struggle, but one of boundless possibility, a world brimming with hidden patterns waiting to be understood, and problems waiting for compassionate solutions. "The universe is always whispering its secrets, Alistair," he replied, a thoughtful glint in his eyes. "And humanity is always in need of its truths. We just have to be willing to listen, even when the whispers challenge everything we think we know, even when they come from a humble watch in the hands of a quiet old man." His words, simple yet profound, resonated with the quiet strength he had discovered within himself, marking not just the resolution of a conflict, but the dawn of a new era of open inquiry and boundless intellectual exploration in a world now irrevocably altered by his unique vision and his crazy invention. The Second Spring, a legacy of unseen value. 3 years later, the scent of fine clock oil, mingling with the subtle fragrance of freshly polished brass, and the quiet hum of advanced diagnostic equipment, filled Arthur Finch's spacious minimalist studio. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a meticulously cultivated urban garden, illuminating a large interactive display that showcased real-time global artifact preservation trends. Vibrant green where once there was historical stagnation, a testament to his vision. Gone were the makeshift components and the harsh concrete of abandoned spaces. In their place, sleek, self-sustaining, resonant horology installations, the evolution of his crazy invention, were being meticulously designed and prototyped. His once cramped existence in a forgotten alleyway was a distant memory, replaced by a workspace that pulsed with quiet intellectual energy and a profound sense of purpose. He still worked late into the night, driven by the same insatiable curiosity that had fueled him in solitude, yet now supported by a global team of brilliant historians, perceptive horologists, and innovative technologists, all eager to expand the reach and understanding of his groundbreaking horological system. Arthur Finch, once a solitary shadow dismissed by an arrogant security guard, was now a world-renowned pioneer, his system forming the cornerstone of a new global cultural heritage paradigm. Arthur was deeply committed to paying it forward. He understood the quiet despair of being overlooked, the burning frustration of having truth dismissed, and the profound impact of a single act of kindness or cruelty. Leveraging his position as the Chief Innovations Officer of the Lumen Institute's Interdisciplinary Resonant Provenance Division and the driving force behind the burgeoning resonant horology movement, he established the Vance Chronological Preservation Project. This nonprofit organization provided generous scholarships, state-of-the-art conservation studios, and invaluable mentorship to aspiring historians and horologists, particularly those from marginalized communities or unconventional backgrounds who were pursuing radical, potentially paradigm-shifting ideas in artifact authentication and digital integration that might otherwise be stifled by traditional corporate or academic structures. He ensured these aspiring minds had the financial freedom, intellectual support, and access to resources he had so desperately lacked during his own formative years. His foundation, affectionately known as the Timekeepers Guild, actively sought out students and researchers who saw connections where others saw only disparate fields, fostering an environment where daring questions and unorthodox approaches to historical art, horological science, and engineering were celebrated, not suppressed. He believed that every individual held a unique, internal design language, and his program sought to provide the tools and freedom for those voices to emerge. He frequently gave public lectures, not just on the intricate theories behind his resonant horology, but on the importance of intellectual honesty, artistic courage, and the necessity of questioning established norms. His voice, once soft and hesitant, now carried a powerful message that resonated far beyond the confines of the horological world, inspiring countless individuals to trust their unique visions and challenge the status quo in their own fields. He often spoke of the hidden patterns in the universe, the fractal truths that reveal themselves when one is willing to look beyond conventional boundaries and embrace solutions from unexpected sources, from the doodles of the dismissed to the profound insights of the overlooked. His personal story, now a public legend, served as a powerful testament to his philosophy. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Arthur stood before a packed auditorium at the prestigious Global Cultural Heritage Summit in Dubai, a forum that, years prior, Mr. Reginald Thorne had only ever dreamed of attending, still touting his traditionalist acquisition dogma in small regional art fairs. But today, the air in the gleaming Dubai hall was vibrant with eager anticipation, not stifling academic orthodoxy. He was explaining a particularly complex aspect of his resonant horology technology, his fingers gliding across a vast interactive display, sketching an elegant, swirling, self-evolving equation. It was the very equation that, years ago, Mr. Thorne had scorned as doodling, the visual representation of the algorithm that had not only brought profound aesthetic experiences to historical preservation worldwide, but had, inadvertently, shielded the museum's digital archives from utter collapse, revealing his profound oversight and securing a future for his, now very different, cultural heritage department. The symbolism was not lost on the audience. He paused, turning to the diverse audience, a mix of seasoned museum curators, curious philanthropists, and eager young historians from every corner of the globe, his eyes alight with the same quiet passion that had driven him through countless lonely nights in a damp alleyway. "This equation," he said, gesturing to the glowing symbols behind him, which pulsed with a soft internal light, "was once dismissed as mere clumsiness. It was considered unconventional, impractical, even crazy, because it didn't fit neatly into existing frameworks of historical expression or technological understanding. It challenged everything we thought we knew about the very nature of cultural artifacts, their creation, and their impact, and even digital resilience. But the natural world, much like the digital realm, doesn't care about our preconceptions or our academic structures. It simply is." He smiled, a profound, knowing smile that carried the wisdom of his extraordinary journey. "Our task, as innovators, as artists, as problem solvers, isn't to force the world into our existing frameworks, but to listen to its whispers, to follow the truth wherever it leads, no matter how uncomfortable or revolutionary it may seem. Sometimes the most robust solution is the one that looks like a piece of abstract art. Sometimes the most profound breakthrough comes from the most unexpected place, from a voice that was once utterly dismissed, from a simple drawing in the hands of a quiet old man. The equation, now widely accepted and taught as fundamental in advanced horological theory, computational aesthetics, and even interdisciplinary studies worldwide, was not merely a formula, it was a living, breathing symbol of the profound shift he had brought about. It was a beacon of truth illuminating a new path for global understanding and human cooperation between disciplines. Arthur stood at the nexus of a thriving intellectual and humanitarian community, no longer confined to the shadows of an alley, but a guiding light for the future of historical art, cultural technology, human ingenuity, and global well-being. He had not only disproven a dismissive security guard's prejudiced judgment, but, in doing so, had opened up an entirely new dimension of human potential, proving that even the most quiet and unassuming voices, armed with truth and unwavering conviction, can echo with the loudest, most world-changing impact, perpetually seeking the next uncharted frontier of knowledge and beauty. His art had indeed secured a fortune, not just for himself, but for a world in desperate need of a second spring, a renewal of vision and spirit. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.